Hi everyone, welcome to How to Create a Home Practice, the video series. It's easy to get overwhelmed when beginning a home practice. So instead of trying to put together a full class-length practice, let's just start with a single pose. Here's the basic template we'll use for this video and all the subsequent ones. We'll choose a pose. We'll identify the body parts that are involved or used in the pose. We'll warm up those body parts, and then we'll do the pose. After that, we'll cool down and have a short relaxation or shavasana. In our first video, downward facing dog is going to be our chosen pose. Since downward facing dog is one of the most fundamental and widely taught poses, it seems logical to start here. The body parts that we'll want to warm up are the spine and the legs, specifically the hamstrings, the calves, and the ankles. We're going to start in kind of a traditional yoga class way with a little bit of gathering. So I'm going to take some props. In a studio, I would use blankets. However, since I'm home, I'm going to just use a couple of bath towels. I'm going to come up to a seated position such that I can easily maintain my spine in its neutral curves, or its natural position. From here, I'll rest my hands, close my eyes, begin some deep breathing. Inhaling through my nose and exhaling through my mouth. Of course, as long as you're breathing, it doesn't really matter how you're doing this. After a few deep breaths, let your breath return to its natural rhythm and just observe that for a couple of breath cycles. With our next exhale, we'll bring our palms together into Namaste. And then we'll take a nice generous inhale. As we exhale, releasing the head toward the fingertips. Dropping the hands, inhaling the head up, and opening the eyes. The other nice thing about this gathering section is that it allows us to move away from the busyness of our day or whatever is going on in the world around us, and allows us to begin our focus inward and on ourselves. From here, we're going to start with warming up the legs. So I'll move my props out of my way and I'll come to lie on my back. And I'll start by alternately stretching or straightening one leg at a time. And I'm going to be in a position where my spine stays in its neutral lumbar curve and my legs are straight. So if that means that my leg is at an angle, that's fine. It's more important for it to be straight so that we can access and stretch the back chain of the leg, hamstrings, calves. So wherever you can, get that stretch and stay in your neutral lumbar curve. Try your foot position in two different places. The first, as I'm doing now, is more of an extended ankle, or what I like to call gas pedal foot. Do that for a few times. And then flex your ankle and notice the stretch on the back chain of your leg changes. The next time the leg that you started with is extended, bend your knee and start to circle your ankle. First in one direction and then in the other. And then straighten the leg again and extend the ankle and flex it. Extend and flex. And do the same thing on the other leg. Ankle circles. And flex and extend. When you're even, bring both feet to the floor, roll over to one side, and push yourself up to hands and knees. Because we're going to work the spine, I'm going to come up on some height, so I'm going to come and take my towels again and just situate myself so the length from the mat to my hips is close to the length from the mat to my shoulders. Now you can do this without any props. I just happen to like this. It puts my spine in a different position. And I'm going to start with flexing and extending my spine, initiating all my movement from my tailbone or my pelvis. So I'm going to start with the extension. So I will inhale, lift my pelvis, and the movement moves all the way up my spine to my neck and head. And then I'll round, initiating from my pelvis to flexion. Inhale to extension. Exhale to flexion. One more time. Inhale to extension. Exhale to flexion. And then we'll add on inhaling to extension, and then glide the hips back toward the heels, keeping the extension in the spine. Inhale back to the extended spine, round to flexion. Inhale to extension, and glide the hips back. This time when we glide the hips back, we're going to let the spine come into flexion. We'll slide our knees off the props and move them out of the way. And come down to child's pose. If you want a deeper child's pose, you can take your knees wide. And take a couple of breaths. As we begin to set up for downward facing dog, we'll want to widen our scapula. So we'll walk the hands forward, and when the elbows are straight and off the mat, then we'll externally rotate the humerus, the upper arm bone, until the scapula widen across our backs. We'll release. Press the hands into the mat again and externally rotate. It kind of feels like you're rotating your elbows to face one another. And widen the scapula. Now we'll keep the scapula wide and walk the fingers forward a little bit farther. This is the position our hands are going to stay in for our warm-up and then for downward facing dog. So this exercise, in addition to warming us up, also determines the foot to hand length of our downward facing dog. From here, we'll rock up to hands and knees, reset the knees to hip width apart, tuck the toes under, press the hands into the floor, lift the hips up and back. We're going to call this bent knee, downward facing dog, or squatty dog. We'll inhale back to hands and knees, and exhale to child's pose, this time keeping the knees and the hands in the current position. Repeating 2 more times. Up to squatty dog. Inhale, hands and knees. Exhale, child's pose. 1 more time. Inhale, hands and knees, tuck the toes. Hips go up and back. Squatty dog. From here, alternately stretch one leg and then the other. Heels are moving in the direction of the mat. They don't need to touch. So this is the other opportunity to stretch out the hamstrings and the calves 1 more time before our target pose. After you've tread the legs a few times, straighten both legs. Now, if you find when you straighten both legs, you lose your neutral lumbar curve, keep a tiny bend in your knees. And from here, in downward facing dog, find a steady, even breath. And take about 3 to 5 steady breaths. And then bend your knees and come to child's pose. Take a couple of breaths here. And then let's repeat. Inhale up to hands and knees, tuck your toes under, lift your hips up and back, keep your neutral spine, come to downward facing dog. Breathe. Have your gaze be towards the center of your mat, so as to keep your neck, your cervical spine, in its neutral position. And come back to child's pose. So you can choose the number of times that you go into and out of downward facing dog. You can choose the number of breaths that you sustain while you're in downward facing dog. For our purposes, we're going to move on to our cool down and our relaxation. For cool down, we're going to come to lie on our backs again. Once again with the knees bent. This time, we'll take the knees as wide as our sticky mat, make sure our props are out of the way, and extend our arms out to each side. So I'm maintaining a bit of a neutral lumbar spine, and then I'm going to synchronize my movements with my breath. As I exhale, I'll windshield wiper my knees in one direction and roll my head in the opposite direction. I'll inhale up to center, and I'll exhale knees and head in the opposite direction. Once I've done several iterations of this windshield wiper movement and that I'm even, I've gone to both sides the same number of times, then I'll come back to center and I'll roll over to one side, supporting my head with a hand or an arm and pushing myself up to find any props that I might need for Shavasana and relaxation. If it's chilly, I might want to take a blanket over me. I'll lay back down, my hands at my sides. Bring my attention to my breathing. And spend some time in Shavasana. When I decide I'm finished with Shavasana, I'll bend my knees. Once again, roll over to one side and support my head, and stretch my top leg out to help me come up to a seated position. And that is a home practice of one pose. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this video. And I hope that you'll join me again the next time we choose a pose for our creating a home practice video. Namaste.